Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Concussion Nerds podcast. Today, we have a special guest for you. You all know that when I bring someone into this show, it's because either they're a clinical colleague of mine and they have some wealth of knowledge to offer, or it's the inspiring people that I get to meet, usually through social media, to be honest, that have amazing stories and this heart to want to give back, to share that story, to help other people on their journeys. And then they get to come be guests on here too. And so today, I want to introduce you to one of those people because we literally connected on social media. I'm going to say like 2 weeks ago. And we had our first conversation today. And I feel like I probably should have just recorded our entire conversation because we've already talked about so many different facets and avenues of a concussion healing journey. And so today, I'm really excited to introduce you to Jessica Ciampini. Hello, Jessica.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
So excited you are here. Jessica, professionally, is a clinical psychologist as well as a behavioral therapist. As a human, Jessica is a loving, kind, compassionate woman who has such a big heart to help people in their own journeys and in their own lives. So, Jessica, I am thrilled that you are here and we can learn more about your story and that you're so open to sharing it for the audience that's here. So thank you.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
So I did a deep dive on Jessica's Instagram before we chatted today, but obviously you've had and are still on your own concussion healing journey.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's funny because the first time I looked at your Instagram, I saw your video, your post on your swim meets and your cycling. And so you were also a high level athlete. And so I would love for you to share, to kind of start us off. There's so many things that we're going to detour into today, but I would love for you to share a little bit with our audience on who you are and kind of a little bit of that concussion journey. And I'll ask questions throughout, but that you've been on. So like, when did this happen and how did it impact your life?
Yeah. So it happened in 2019, actually the end of 2019. And when it happened, it was actually just before the new year. And how it impacted my life was at that moment, I was unconscious. I hit the head or my left frontal lobe as well as my front, and the left frontal lobe was damaged. So I had a traumatic brain injury. I was unconscious for about 2.5 minutes. I woke up and I was in the hospital in a puddle of my own urine. So I remember that like very vividly. Fast forward, I found out when I lost 70% of my memory, and it impacted my life like from that very moment in the hospital. So going home the next day, that's when I took it all in. I remember looking around and trying to even think about things, and I had no idea like what had happened. Luckily, I had family and friends to like sort of reel me in and tell me what they knew. I had an anaphylactic reaction. If we didn't talk about that, how it happened.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was from an anaphylactic reaction. I had absolutely no idea. And when I hit my head, it was within seconds, and it literally looked like I was shot on the floor. And I hit my head very hard. So at that time, so again, fast forward a few days after being released from the hospital, I was slurring on my words a lot. I was very irritable, not so much of headaches, but lighting, everything, like just sound. I've heard buzzing. I had no idea like what was going on. And I just knew I wanted to run. I wanted to get up. And this is where we talked about earlier. Natasha and I talked about identity. We have an identity. And I felt in that moment, now I cannot do that because I tried to get up. I tried to do so as an ex-kinesiologist, and we talked about how I shifted my career in 2019. People know me as a personal trainer and as a kinesiologist. Most of my following community, they know that about me. I tried to get very creative after days after. I was like, okay, I'm going to try unilateral, like single leg things. I'll try to run in my apartment. I knew there was something off. I knew I had a coach. I knew
Quick question for you. And then sorry, and I don't mean to, were you not given any instructions to be referred to a clinic after that, at that point in time?
Well, I was referred to a neurologist. I was referred to a whole team. Yes, okay. I was, but then it was just the days like
the instinctual days following for yourself.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. The media, just me waking up. Actually, before waking up, I had to sleep with a family member. It is very common for those that perhaps are listening, do know that when you do have a TBI, there is a risk of you can potentially your heart rate can drop significantly. So already being as an athlete, my heart rate ranges from 39 to 42. I did an ECG testing. I guess we'll get into that as well. They were quite worried in the department of and seeing how low it was, and because of the vasovagal response. And I guess we'll touch that as well, and what that means and what happens. So again, just being very aware with my body. I didn't feel like I can do the normal things like standing. I felt like, okay, I can't stand for too long. Sitting, okay, I need to lay down. The light's on. Let's turn off the light. Everything was bothering me. Everything was irritable, and I was very emotional. So my rehab started within 2 days. I unfortunately had to drop out of school at the time. I wasn't able to work. I was a single person, and this happened, I think it was like about 33. Yeah. So 2019. So it was fairly like still young. I was going through like my master's at the time. And that just changed my life at that time.
Yeah. We always talk about, one, and this is also why I love hearing people's stories so much, and why I love sharing people's stories, is because one concussion is one concussion. As in how that presents in one person, it can present completely differently in someone else. Commonly will. That's when we talk about rehab of concussion, for example, it's why we can't have cookie cutter approaches, because every individual is different. When we talk about the concept of, let's just touch on that identity piece for a minute. So we talked about earlier about, I feel like it's in society today, we define ourselves so much by what we do. And the other piece, this comment sometimes pisses people off, full disclosure. I hate the term concussion survivor. The reason I don't like it is because you are linking your identity to the concussion.
Yeah.
It is not just like what you do in your life doesn't define who you are as a human. The fact that you had a concussion doesn't define who you are as a human. Do they influence your choices, your trajectory? 100%.
Absolutely.
Like, I'm not taking that away from anybody or anything whatsoever.
Like it, yeah, absolutely it does.
Yeah. And it's obviously true. It's I think, and I would actually love your take on this. I feel like when I work with some of my clients so hard, and we have these conversations a lot, change as a human in general is incredibly challenging for a lot of people. Many of the changes that happen in our lives, we have some control over. We go through a thought process on it, and we decide we're going to change or not.
And what you can change and what you're willing to change. And
yeah. A concussion doesn't give you a choice.
Yeah.
A concussion, like you said, like it was the moment that something started that needed to change. And so on that topic on you of like your life was on a certain path, and then this thing happened and you're like, my life changed. Can you kind of, I guess, highlight a bit more about that and how that change needed to happen and it wasn't a choice, and how that kind of sat within you?
Yeah. So how it sat with me is, well, why it changed, or how it changed rather. It changed by not being able to retain information. So hence not being in school at the time, and then having to eventually go back. That being a change. Retaining information. Of course, there was a memory component as well. Not being able to drive. So license was taken away because my vision was greatly impacted.
Okay.
Yeah, that was another big area as well. And doing things at home, I needed the help. I needed help at home, whether it be in finances, whether it be cleaning my home. In terms of hygiene, I was pretty good with most people. I mean, it's not black and white. It's very different for everybody, right? Everybody is different, and everyone will deal with things very differently. So those are like I guess like the main things. Again, would be on a daily basis. It would be like cleaning my apartment, but finances were a big thing too. Like when going through any concussion so severe, even a mild concussion, you tend to forget things naturally. Therefore, having certain dates, and how I prompted myself, I didn't really know how to do that at the time. But luckily, having a clinical background helped tremendously, helped me at the time. And even now, of course, but I can imagine how hard it is for the general population, like for those that don't have these resources, and how hard it is to go through that process. Right.
Yeah.
And I like that we're talking about it more often. You see that on social media, and you mentioned it's an identity. So not being online, you need to stay away off your screen when you're going through that period of recovery. Screens are probably the number one of the hierarchy, is off screens, and we're always on our screen. We're on autopilot every day where we're for what? Who knows? So like being off online or offline from Instagram, many people, and I guess I mentioned it to you before, people would question, like going back to identity, where are you, Dad? You're not cycling. You're not running. Why aren't you doing any races? And those are the comments that I received. I opened up my messages after 6 to 8 months, and it took that long. Like I just
good for you.
yeah, I had no interest at the time. My interest was me. My identity was Jessica. Like, how can I get back to volunteering? How can I get back to being a daughter? How can I get back to being a loving, like, dog mom and partner and all those things? Like,
Yeah.
my main goal is, and of course, to be out there again. I really wanted to run. I really wanted to get back on that. It meant it's a lot. We're going back to that piece of identity, but those things propel you to have new things. But I can get to that.
How you look at something can also like sets the course and sets the trajectory of things too. And again, Jessica and I had an entire conversation before we hit record, which we just should have recorded. But when you're on a journey and like a healing journey, you have to be so intentional with how you choose to spend your time and your attention. And you have to be intentional because of elements of like the amount of energy you actually have to function in a day, or both in terms of an actual task, in terms of the stress that layers onto that. You have to be so intentional with who you spend your time with, the boundaries that you set. And there's so many pieces that we kind of talked about earlier too, about this element of what I say to my clients is the things that you have, the tools, the skills that you have to use and be intentional with in your concussion recovery, whether that be the setting the boundaries, whether that be the staying off the screens, whatever that is, those truly become your superpowers later in life. Like as you kind of move through this, because all of those things help optimize how you function as a human when we have a fairly healthy brain and nervous system. But when you're recovering and you're on this process, you have to choose to be intentional. And I love what you said, like your priority, Jessica, was you.
Yeah.
And I love that, because so often, especially as women, we struggle to put ourselves first. Mm-hmm. And so was that something new for you? Is that something where have you always been this woman that your mindset and that priority is taking care of me, to take care of others? Like, can you speak to that a little bit?
So it's more so after my concussion, I will do and respond and attend when, of course, like as priority, but it's me first. In the past, people would say I probably spread myself thin now, as I like to do different things, helping people, being in community. But I do know where there's a very hard cutoff. Whether it be having a call, okay, I have 5 minutes, whether it be I'm just on social media. And when we talked about social media, it was something that, like, even though you would be scrolling on autopilot now, but at the time, I've actually had no energy to do that. I had no energy. If I went on my screen, that was a negative reinforcement. I was like, okay, this is bothering me. I need to get off of it. Versus like, if I didn't, had I not had any symptoms like that stimulus, then I probably would have. But my goal, again, my motivation was here. It was like, how do I get back to that? And these are my steps, working with my clinical team, my PT, OT, and going with that. And it's about the journey there. It's you walk before you run. Mm-hmm. And it's so important. And I like to say I have like the 3 P's of energy. It's called like 3 P's of energy conversations: your pace, your position, your priority, and your plan. And those are the 4 things, that I always talked about. I've journaled about it and what each. I love it. Yeah. So I stuck with that, and that helped. Yeah.
I know so many people that struggle with this, that struggle to put themselves as the priority. Yeah. What would you say to those people that are listening?
I would say, first, know who you are and go with that. Who are you? Yes, you may be a mother, you might be a clinician, you might be a father, a daughter, but who are you? Who are you? What are those verbs, adjectives? Like, what are those things? And associate yourself with that and really hone in on that. And that becomes your superpower. So that caring person, whether you maybe like to volunteer, like all those different things. And so it's really right. I still write a lot. I love journaling, and it really helped me. When you become very crystal clear on what you want to do in your life and goal, Many of us here are very goal oriented. This is how listeners that are listening, very driven and goal oriented. But how we got there, most likely, we thought about it, we envisioned it, we wrote about it, we talked about it, we put it out there into the world. So the same thing applies to us. And it's a very important piece of any type of recovery, whether it be an acute or a catastrophic, a mental, and anything. Like it could be something that you cannot see, because this is an injury that we cannot see from the naked eye. It does not look like I've had that, but have any or past injuries I go through on a daily basis. I still struggle with my speech. I try very hard in my personal life to be on time by doing certain things and prompting myself. So the person that I am is being on time. And how do I do that? I plan. I work backwards.
I love it. Thank you. So we talked about in 2019 when this happened, obviously, and you were like, my vision was really impacted. I did not feel like myself versus today. So can you share with the audience, what do you do today? Because my audience is new to you. So what are the things that you can do today that bring you joy, that love? And then we can talk about where you still have challenges, but what are the things that light you up that you get to do today that when that concussion first happened in 2019 were not an option?
Okay, that's a great question. So there are some new things that light me up after having this injury. I discovered new things, but the main thing is being outdoors. I love being outdoors. I love whether it be hiking, running is the top for me. I used to do some activities that I no longer participate, one being like Muay Thai. I used to really like enjoy it. I guess we can talk about that, but there's more of that PTSD and like accepting, like where having some acceptance and still doing things that you love. And again, to answer your question, is cycling. Those that most people that know me, they know that I love cycling. I love running. Swimming has been fairly new coming back to it. I took some time away after the injury, especially open water swimming. I learned how to swim in the lake. Actually, after my concussion, I learned how to breathe underwater. Breathing
I
was
didn't even know you could do that. You can breathe underwater?
Well, when you are in a lane swim, for instance, or when you are swimming in a lake, you do need to practice like breathing. So there's the technique. So the inhale and versus exhale. If you don't breathe, then you're eventually going to die in the water. So there's
we don't want that.
Yeah. So that's a whole nother. So I learned at that point after a year, I was like, I'm ready for this. I'm going to go back into I'm going to now learn how to swim versus me. I used to just swim. I didn't even know what I was doing.
Okay.
I just would go into the water. I had no idea. So I hired a coach and I joined a community, and I was like, I'm just going to join different communities and, embarrass myself and be vulnerable. That's all for me. That's what I went into. I said, I know I'm going to look so silly and uncoordinated after my TBI. I used to love dancing. Ask me how to dance. Like now I could probably dance, but my coordination absolutely sucked. I needed to work on the coordination, the unilateral movements, and having the background that I have, I was very fortunate to have experience of what to do. And even there's some things I didn't know. I went to my PT. Referring to your team, working together with a multidisciplinary team was very helpful. Coordination, vision, looking at all these different approaches, because it's the holistic approach. Your vision, there's your head, that you hit your head, whether it be the left or the front. And there's so many parts of the brain that whether you hit that side of it, then there are certain things that will impact that. So the cognition, executive functioning, that did impact me in the pool and open water swimming. And how it's your coordination. There's PTSD associated with that. Your vision, you're wearing goggles, you can feel claustrophobic. So there's just so many moving parts to it. And I'm really glad that we're having that conversation. But those will be the three things, as well as yoga. Really, when I put that as like maybe the last, because it is something that I do it religiously, but I don't often talk about it because it's such an inner thing that it lights me up before anything else, before all that other like hard competitive stuff. I need to do something soft. I need to do something to lower my nervous system to get me back into that state of, okay, I'm calm. I can do this before bed. I can do it in the afternoon on the weekend.
I love that. Yeah. And I love that you've been able to find the things that very much work for you as you continue on this path of learning who you are, continuing to challenge yourself. Like I always say, least favorite sentence that anyone, and I get so angry when I hear it all the time, is always the like, this is as good as you're gonna get.
Oh yeah,
this is your new normal. And I always get like, if you put me on this is when I go on my soapbox, and I'm not gonna do it today, but this is always this piece of like, if you didn't have a concussion, the person saying that, you would never accept that if someone said that to you. If someone looked at me as a healthy human and said, this is how you're going to be, I'd tell you to fuck right off. Because we are constantly evolving as human beings.
Absolutely.
And for someone to turn around to say that,
like we can't stop that.
No.
Things are constantly evolving. We are lifelong learners, and
Yes.
things are going to happen. You don't have to necessarily have a concussion, but you can have anything can happen.
Anything.
So having this is it's a catalyst, because there are some personality changes. There are things that
for sure.
Yeah. And you can't stop that.
No. There's so many things I want to talk about, but I want to go into quickly. So you just had an incident not too long ago, and I think around in the pool with PTSD.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Can you share a little bit about that with us
too? So it's great that it's so recent, so I can actually talk about it. Yeah. And this happened. So I'm with the Mississauga, it's master swimming team. I'm here in Canada, and most of the team, about 85% of the team, do flip turn. So flip turn, what it is, if you're in a lane swim, you get to the end and you literally flip and you turn to the other side, whether it be 25 meter or 50 meter. Me, I joined this team. I just went all in. I was like, okay, I don't know how to flip turn, but I'm still going into it of, I want to learn. I eventually want to race, which I have. Competitions, it's very competitive. I just recently learned how to do a flip turn. And what happened, I'm not fully, but what happened in the pool, and this happened about 2 weeks ago, actually, there were 3 of us in total that were learning how to flip turn, and 2 got it on after a few minutes. And it was very hard for me. The PTSD, I noticed it and I said, I'm not fully recovered because it's still there. And how I knew is one of my fellow swimmers, she was beside me, and she's a nurse, and she's like, I'm right here beside you. If anything happens, I'm right here. So I said, could you please look underwater? Just be there. So we're learning how to propel your body forward. So you're swimming, you're doing your freestyle, so your normal stroke, and you need to flip. When I did that, I flinched because I thought my head was so close, centimeters closer to the pool, which in theory it actually wasn't. I remember I flinched at that moment. It was very emotional. I was very emotional, and my coach was right there. And the funny thing is, I always like to find the silver lining. She got these little noodles for me, and then she got these little. It was so cute. It was this McCain handle noodles. They look like little McCain happy faces. And I was like, I want me to wear this. We're in in my mind, I'm we're in a competitive team. I look like a freak. I'm going to wear this. But she's like, no, just try it. And I looked around. It was a hard time, but it was actually the highlight. And it will be the highlight until I fully learn how to do it. But there's a lot of fear. And she was very clear. My coach, Nat, she said, it's going to be really hard for you if we don't get the step first. It's the most dangerous part if you're not flipping at the certain timing, because your body will propel down and you can potentially hit your head. So that for me was a big, I was like, okay, do I still want to do it? Yes. So I'm just taking that step and being someone that's very, as an athlete and very competitive, I want to get to that step 5 before step 2, but you need to walk before you run. So I'm instilling that in my mind to this day. Every Tuesday, Thursday, going to practice, I'm not looking at everyone else, what they're doing. They do that, but I'm here with a trajectory. You talked about, we talked about having that, survivor and identity. So because I have PTSD, I mean, it's still there, obviously, and not using that as my trajectory going into the pool. I have PTSD, I can't do it. No, the first step is to get the flip and then listen to the coach and slowly get closer to that and not think about, oh, I'm an athlete, I need to get to step 5. That doesn't make sense.
We have to walk before we run. I love that. And the other piece that I love so much about that story, thank you for sharing. But the other piece that I love so much is we talk about the importance of who we surround ourselves with in life in general, but particularly on a healing journey. And that it's so important to be in an environment where you feel safe, where you feel seen, where you feel heard. And the story you described just highlights the beauty of the community you've chosen to surround yourself with, the safety your teammates and your coach give you, the acceptance, the zero judgment, but to show you that love and that support and that grace, to be like, Jessica, you got this, and we're here to support you every step of the way. And the response that you had makes complete sense. And we're here to hold your hand through it and help you move through this, to not let this deter you, because you have the strength and you have the drive and the motivation to work through this.
Yeah. It sort of feels like getting a little emotional, but
Yeah.
and I guess initially you would feel like a black sheep. Like you look around and yeah. And it's something that it could be an emotional thing because it's harder for you to do something. It takes
Absolutely.
this much time to get there. Like when I was going through my master's, it took me longer than what for the most people, general population. Of course, I had
Yeah.
to stop because I was in rehab at the time and just retaining that information. So supplementation helped, working with my PT, but
Yeah.
going into the pool, I'm like, wow, everyone knows what they're doing, but having that support, like looking up at Nat and being at the just pausing and having a few tears and just calming myself down. It was such a
Yeah.
natural thing. She's like, okay, we're gonna do this one by one, and having two people, like two fellow
Yeah.
swimmers. I'm right there and also applauding. So I remember when I finally got the flip, I yelled, I did it. It was like, it was so, I embraced it. I was like, it was
I
so,
love it.
it's such a big highlight of my week. Like that was my big win. And
Yeah.
it literally happened 2 weeks ago. So it was like me yelling, like the
Children.
world.
Yeah. I love it.
Yeah. So that was, yeah.
For those of you listening, what I hope you're hearing Jessica say over and over again is that she is following in her own path. And Jess, you keep putting one foot in front of the other, and you have those thoughts that we all have of like, I'm going to look like an idiot. And like, do I really want to do this? And like, oh my gosh, because you've said it already, like, I would have been so much better at this before my concussion. I would have learned this so much faster. Yeah. It's so easy to let those limiting thoughts hold you back, but you don't. You keep putting one foot in front of the other and embracing that discomfort and embracing that awkwardness to grow as a human. And so how do you do that? How do you not let those limiting thoughts, because you think them and then you're like, basically like, screw off limiting thoughts.
Yeah. Well, there's some rewiring and there's like your internal versus external locus of control, and knowing what that is and how, like, going backwards, like what I do in that moment when I looked around, I was like, everyone's swimming, they look so graceful and they're flipping. So I felt that. And when I was flipping underwater, I said that to myself, oh my gosh, this is so hard. And I didn't want to stop, but what drives me there is something that I've never been able to do. And that's the biggest thing. I've never been able to do these things. I've never tried. And that is my superpower because I am doing it. Even if I don't get to a full flip and like I push off the wall, I just flipped like underwater. Like to me, like that's a win. And I'm a natural, like I love learning new things. I love to develop like new skills. Had I always been like that? Not as much versus like after my injury. I think that I'm more
Really?
Yeah, I'm more intuitive. I feel I'm like, I want to know and learn more. So this is the caveat, is because we talked about this before we recorded. My life was on pause, not because we want to, it just naturally has to happen. For a year, I had the trajectory, and I worked with as a therapist myself, I worked with my own therapist of having this internal dialogue of it could be I am blank. But in that case, for me, it was, I am behind, I am inadequate. And I used to associate those words with, when we talked about the verbs and like who we are, our characteristics, I used to have that trajectory in 2020.
Okay.
And yeah, there's a lot of rewiring. There's a lot of self-talk. We can have negative self-talk and it happens very easily. But what do we do when it slowly creeps up on us, like the ed versus the ego, right? So that used to be my trajectory. I'm very open and I can talk about that as well. And I felt I was comparing myself a lot, and being in my mid-30s. So I'm in my mid-30s. People are engaged and they're married. And I felt my life was on pause. I'm a single woman. And I had this trajectory that I'm just behind. I'm behind on my life. And it's very interesting because now doing things, having that I'm behind, quote, I'm behind on life, whatever that might mean to us, to me, to you, it felt like I needed to try new things because I didn't at the time. I wasn't able to go into a pool, and even driving, I just didn't drive as much. So I love taking long rides now. I would like to, but the brain just doesn't like it all the time. And I'm sure many of us, like as clinicians, like hearing that, we can understand and appreciate driving late at night. So as much as I like to, I try my best, and I know where that threshold is.
Okay, I feel like we could talk for hours. There's so many things we like haven't touched on that like we might just have to have you back, to be honest. But I do know without a shadow of a doubt, And I keep calling you Jess. I hope that's okay.
Oh, please.
I'm really shortening your name this whole episode. I'm like, I hope she's okay with that.
I'm named for like Jay or Jess. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Okay. I need to say to you, like, as you've continued to share more and like what we talked about before, like, I hope you can see how much of an inspiration you are to people just by being who you are and how you choose to show up for yourself in your life. And I know without a shadow of a doubt that the people listening to this episode, I know they're going to have tears listening to it because I know who listens to these episodes. And I know with zero question that you just sharing what you've shared today is going to instill hope, is going to instill inspiration, is going to help people who are really feeling stuck and struggling to pick themselves up and just take the smallest step forward. And so I hope you know, and I'm so grateful that we connected because you are truly going to be an inspiration just by being you for other people who are on this journey.
Yeah. And when you embrace like where you are and just being you, you don't have to try. And that's very different than I would say in the past, like having to, you know, as children, we try to fit in. We've tried to fit in these like groups.
Oh my gosh, that was my entire adolescent life.
And it's totally, that was me. People that are like on my
channel. Not even my adolescent life, like my early adult, like I'm 40. So you're mid 30s?
Yeah.
30. So I'm 40. I'm turning 42 in 3 weeks. Oh. And I was like, now in the last, since I've been 40, I can tell you now I know who I am.
I mean, everyone's on a different, like mid 30s and 40s, and we're all like segregated as we go into our lives and changes and different things. Yep. But we're segregated in like in adolescence, in high school, you're trying to fit in, but we try to fit in as adults. We try to fit in as whether it be mothers or family members or partners, we try to fit in. What does that look like? And it's such a broad thing. Like, I mean, that's a whole nother
a whole other conversation.
Yeah. We can talk for hours here, but I think like also like what helped me and what I'm still like take their supplements as well. They're different modalities, like you being a PT, there are modalities of working with clinicians, and I'm heavy myself as well. Like I'm so grateful to have that experience of having a background, but the ones that don't, like, I really want to put it out there that there are modalities and there are many resources, but I do get how scary it can be. I get how lonely it can be. I know how you can be in a very dark place because there are many things that, again, I had so many messages like 2 that came in today of someone are not able, like he's forgetting things and his wife is like trying to like figure out like, why are you always forgetting stuff? And he was like, well, I had a concussion years back and now it's like creeping up. So it doesn't happen. Like it's not an immediate.
Doesn't have to be. Nope. It can be years later.
Right. And post-concussive, like, I mean, it is one of the worst places. We try not to get there, but it is very common. It's a very high population. And just like when you're diagnosed with ASD, like you don't often like the children are not diagnosed until afterwards. So things are not like, you don't pick it up very quickly.
Well, and the tricky part and maybe you found this in your recovery night, I'm actually curious to ask, is the hard part I see is there was a time where there was no resources for concussion. And now we're in a time where, to be super blunt, everyone and their dog can fix your concussion.
Currently.
And so really it's like for the person on the healing journey, it's like, holy crap. And so the messages that I get are people that are like, I've done this, I've done this, I've done this, I'm stuck, I'm plateaued, I don't know what to do. And so for me, and it's like, I always say I'm a physical therapist, but I don't practice in a traditional physical therapy sense. And so for me, it's always that connecting with that person to be like, let's actually step back and let's look at the things you've done. Let's actually talk more about you. And then let's build a plan together. And that may or may not include a traditional treatment plan.
Yeah. That's what we call it in our, I mean, folks that are listening, we're very used to hearing that, like a treatment plan. And it may not be very black and white because it's tailored. And there's nothing
and it
can't
be black and white.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Anyone who tries to, and I'm super blunt in saying any clinician who feels like they can treat concussion in a black and white checklist fashion should not be treating concussion.
It's very different for
everyone.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And I'm like, we were going to talk about like why we meditate at night versus in the morning and all these things.
Well, I wanted to like, maybe we can sort of quickly talk about that. Like if you wanted to just talk about supplements and what currently I'm taking, or I was taking a very higher dosage, and whether it be like DHA and BHA, so fish oil complex, so supplements, vitamin B complex. So vitamin B complex, the fish oil, lion's mane. Some things in this list I currently take, and there are some that I've decreased in the dosage. It just really depends on how I'm feeling. I do listen to how my body's feeling. But in terms of memory, I've tried my best in rehab to retain as much as I can. And again, going back to the acceptance, no matter how much supplements I take, 78% of memory loss is a lot. And I've accepted. I've tried taking many supplements and taking milk thistle to protect my liver because I felt like I was taking a handful of things. Yeah. So again, going back to that list would be the lion's mane, L-carnitine, ginkgo, L-theanine, and actually I have my Arnica here.
Yeah.
I have it here on my desk because I am taking it often. I have a bruise. Actually, I have a bit of a bruise. So when I had my concussion, a lot of health and gut, this is maybe for another topic, but gut health becomes an issue. Your metabolism, of course, there's personality changes and whatnot. I was bruising more frequently and more often than usual. And I'm like, I have no idea why I'm bruising. So the time I found out that I needed more iron, zinc, and I was anemic. I was never anemic before. I had all these things were flaring up. So I take this because of your brain, when you do have a TBI, when you're young and you're bruised, there is blood. So same thing with that. Because people will ask, like, why do you still take it? And like, you don't have that. But it's still very helpful because oftentimes, like if I don't see a physical bruise, I'm taking it for maintenance as well. So I'm still taking the supplements that I've addressed, but except for the lion's mane, I'm not taking that as much. But the fish oil would be the highest and the top of my hierarchy would be about 100 milligrams, and the B complex, so B12 and so on, or the B complex.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love that, like, again, it just highlights how the variability across people's care plans, right? Supplementation, whereas I'm someone who takes, from a supplementation standpoint, I take a vitamin. I live in the Pacific Northwest, so it rains 6 months of the year. So I take a vitamin D because I don't get enough sunlight.
What happened? I'm sure.
It's like I take a vitamin D. I do take a lion's mane because I do like cognitive and memory things. Yeah. I take an omega-3 for a fish oil, and I take an NAC. And so
I also take that as well, and MG. So I take magnesium every day religiously before bed.
Yeah. And so what I say to people listening is, if you are going to start to introduce a supplement routine, please don't do it uninformed. It is important that either you discuss with somebody, especially if you are also on a medication of some sort, that you get those dosages with guidance. And honestly, that full disclosure, that's when I typically refer out for consults with naturopathic doctors or functional medicine practitioners.
Taking antidepressant, oftentimes after concussion, if there's some association with like any diagnosis so I had adjustment disorder, but oftentimes if someone is depressed, and it depends on how they're coping with it, they're unable to cope, then you most likely will be given antidepressant. I personally haven't taken it, but there are other ways. And if it's not antidepressant, then what else are you doing? So personally for me, again, working with a PT, I loved acupuncture. Cupping really helped, and the supplementation was great. Still take it. I mean, we don't get everything in our foods, and definitely
not anymore, no.
And sleep. And that's in the supplements as well. So sleep would be the first thing. Sleep changes, like it changed tremendously. Like your circadian rhythm, like you know how important that is, but your sleep is the priority. Like you are the priority, your hygiene before bed and in the morning. Like that was the biggest thing for me, of having my like alarms. I still, to this day, I set alarms because the time goes by so quickly that I just set an alarm, and I need to ensure that I try to get to bed within that like 10 to 10:30 as close as possible. I'm not perfect. It does happen. Some days I'll get home a bit later from training, or along like after work, I'll train. So the sleep is the most important, and also like not comparing ourselves. Like what we're seeing on social media has taken a big toll of like everything. There are many great things, and then there are things that are not so great. Again, I work with many kids, and their heads are embedded in social media, and how are they comparing themselves? So I go back into, just very quickly, I'll say this, is comparing when people get up. Like we talk on social media a lot about like early risers, that 5 a.m. club.
Oh, that is never going to be me.
Need sleep. I've accepted
never happening.
People would say, well, like your schedule is very like lenient. Well, I kind of made my life that way because I know that having this experience, I cannot start my day at like AM. Like I will start maybe training, but try to
Well, and I find it so funny, the algorithm one day goes, so our lovely algorithm, sometimes it feeds me exactly what I need to hear, and sometimes I'm like, oh shit. And so I'm someone that works out. So like, I am not a 5 a.m. riser. I never will be. I am like, my alarm goes off at 7. And I work out at the gym. I am consistent in my workouts and my exercise because I believe in the importance of it. And it's a huge impact to my mental health as well as my physical health. But I fit it in my day where it works. So sometimes that's the morning, sometimes it's the middle of the afternoon, sometimes it's 7 o'clock at night. Yep. And it was literally, there was this one day there was this, like, I don't know why, but the lovely algorithm, I decided, and I don't doom scroll a lot, but sometimes when I have some time, I'm like, you know what, I'm just going to see what the reels have to offer me today. Yep. And literally, I kid you not, it probably showed up 10 different times with like different people using this, you know how people duplicate?
Yeah.
Using 10 like different accounts being like, what does the time you work out at the gym tell you? Like 5 to 7 a.m. was like, you are a high performing entrepreneur.
Wow, they're really
8 to 10, you were likely a mother who just dropped their kids off at school. 10 to 12, you might have some flexibility, anything, whatever. It's not a priority for your lifestyle and you don't actually care about your health. And I looked at that and I was like, so I died because I was like, the person where I fit into your schedule, I'm the person who doesn't prioritize health. Most ridiculous thing in the world.
Yeah, it's very cookie cutter. It's dictate. Yep. And then you, like, psychologically can really put yourself, like, I mean, maybe it could be anyone, like looking at that and listening to it and watching that, say like, okay, well, I'll put myself like here. This is where I'm at. And then you start to then think and believe that.
Yeah. So I just say, like, like you've talked about, like with social media, like, don't get stuck in that comparison trap, and also be aware of who you're taking information from.
And just full disclosure. Yeah. Sleep, would be the main thing. So I would say from a concussion standpoint is prioritize your sleep. Everyone, just prioritize your sleep and have some time.
Any great health standpoint, prioritize your sleep. Jess, it has been an absolute honor to have you here. You are a beautiful human being and just like a lovely woman. If you could leave final words for our audience, what would those final words be?
It would be, do what you love to do and not care about what other people are watching or what other people are going to say, because they don't care. Do what you love. And if that means you love sleep, that means you love a late night workout, if that means you love anything, whatever you love to do, do more of it. If you don't do it once a day, try to instill it once a day. And eventually you can gradually increase on that frequency, whether it be 2 times a day. So just do what you love and really find that thing, find that peace, and that is your purpose.
I love it. Thank you. We're going to share your Instagram handle and all that below in the show notes so people can follow you and your journey and stay connected with you. Thank you so very much for being here, for sharing your story and the awareness that you continue to bring into this space. Your heart is like most definitely felt.
Thank you so much for having me, Natasha. Or Nat.
Yeah, I get that sometimes too. Just please don't ever shorten it to Tasha.
I wasn't actually thinking about that, I won't. So Nat.
I grew up being called Tasha. And like the second I moved away to university, I was like, my name is Natasha.
Put your boundaries. Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for being here and for listening. I will be back next week and we will see you soon. That's today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you liked what you heard, give us a like, give us a share, give us a tag on Instagram, and please never hesitate to reach out. We love communicating and connecting with you. Until next week, my friends, have a marvelous day.